Part 25. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mian Bulletin Leng. Chapter 241. A figure is wearing a purple gold robe and a gold patterned jade belt around his waist. He has a handsome face and his hands behind his back. He is clearly the current leader of the Qin dynasty, Qin Mu. Next to it, there is a beautiful woman, who is waiting attentively. The woman is wearing a snow-white dress, her face is beautiful and refined, her skin is crystal clear like mutton fat, her figure is slim and graceful, and her black hair is draped over her shoulders, making her look particularly pure. It was Qiruo. This spiritual spring covers an extremely large area and is surrounded by a circle of crystal clear precious jade, emitting a misty and soft fluorescence. There are inscriptions engraved on the jade, which vaguely reveal a mysterious and obscure atmosphere, absorbing all the spiritual energy around it and gathering it here. The two walked slowly for a while and came to a high platform in the deepest part of Lingquan. On the high platform, there is a jade table. The table is filled with all kinds of precious ingredients, each item is priceless and extremely rare. Behind the desk is a jade-carved screen. A landscape painting is painted on the screen. In the scroll, there are green mountains and green waters, birds singing and fragrance of flowers, pavilions and pavilions. The scenery is pleasant and refreshing. Do you like it here? Qin Mu walked slowly behind Qiruo and chuckled. I like it. Qiruo's pretty face immediately turned red when she heard this. She lowered her head and responded softly. Qin Mu smiled slightly, slowly approached Qiruo, and hugged her round waist. In an instant, their bodies touched each other, and Qin Mu could clearly feel the delicate body of the beauty in his arms trembling slightly, as if she was a little shy. Are you nervous? Qin Mu asked with a smile. Qiruo's cheeks were flushed, her head was lowered, and her voice was as thin as a mosquito. It doesn't matter. You won't be nervous after taking a bath, Qin Mu said. Afterwards, Qin Mu took off his robe, bare his upper body, and slowly stepped into the hot spring lake. This hot spring is a spiritual spring, which has the effect of nourishing the body, increasing longevity, improving qualifications, and prolonging life. He jumped in and lay comfortably on the spiritual spring, letting the warm water wrap around his body. Upon seeing this, Qiruo immediately knelt obediently behind Qin Mu and let the rippling hot spring water soak her stockings. The fair skin showed a faint rosy luster through the moist stockings, which was extremely attractive. Your Majesty, I will give you a massage. Qiruo's pretty face turned red with embarrassment, and she knelt beside her. She picked up water with her slender jade hands and sprinkled it on Qin Mu's body. Then he used slender onion fingers to gently massage Qin Mu's shoulders and chest. Qin Mu responded, enjoying Qiruo's massage and closing his eyes. Soon, the hot spring water completely submerged him. After a while, Qin Mu woke up and opened his eyes. Seeing this, Qiruo quickly stopped what she was doing, knelt down next to Qin Mu, lowered her head, and asked cautiously, How do you feel, Your Majesty? Come down and go clubbing together. Qin Mu turned to glance at her and ordered. Servant, I obey your order. Qiruo's pretty face was hot and she hurriedly agreed. Then he hesitated, slowly took off his socks, exposed his white and round feet, and stepped into the pool. Ripples suddenly appeared in the spiritual spring. Stepping into the spiritual spring, a refreshing feeling of comfort suddenly came over my heart. She closed her beautiful eyes, bathed in the warm water vapor, and relaxed her whole body. She was lying on the edge of the bathtub, her face still as red as a delicate rose. Can you dive? At this time, Qin Mu suddenly asked. Qiruo was stunned for a moment, then nodded, I will naturally dive. Qin Mu smiled when he heard this and said, That's good. Qiruo blinked and quickly reacted. Her pretty face turned redder and she lowered her head, even her earlobes glowed with a faint red glow. The camera zooms out. In the mist, Qin Mu's figure could only be vaguely seen, but Qi Ruo's appearance was not visible. Boom! There was another thunderous explosion, the howling wind and thunder and lightning. In the Zhao mansion, the fighting was still fierce. Countless children of the aristocratic families fled desperately, but more people still fell in a pool of blood. At this moment, at the gate, there were corpses everywhere. Blood flowed into rivers, broken limbs and broken arms were scattered on the ground, and the blood dyed the earth red. The strong smell of blood rose into the sky and was nauseating. The members of the Zhao family suffered heavy casualties, and the remaining dozen or so powerful elders were all covered in blood and swaying, unable to hold on for long. An elder of the Zhao family who was at the soul level was beheaded by a dark god guard and fell to the ground. "Hold them off for me." Many elders of the Zhao family screamed wildly with their eyes split open, but they could not stop the dark god guard at all. "It's over. It's over. We're going to die." Some people collapsed on the ground in despair, their faces ashen. Tonight is destined to be a disaster day for the Zhao family. All efforts have been in vain. They are destined to be unable to escape and can only wait for the disaster of genocide to come. After today, the Zhao family in Chang'an City will no longer exist. Even the patriarch of the Zhao family died under the sword of the Dark God Guard. Who can save the Zhao family? Everyone is filled with despair, sadness, pain, regret, and unwillingness. Other heads of aristocratic families who came to the party were also fighting bloody battles, trying their best to break out. Originally, they were close to achieving this, but since Li Hanshan freed up, their hopes were dashed again. Boom! Thunder shook the earth, and violent lightning lit up the dark night sky. Li Hanshan's palm suddenly shot out, the void trembled, and a terrifying force swept across all directions, incomparably terrifying. When the elders of the Zhao family saw this scene, they turned pale with fright and did not even dare to resist. In the end, they all vomited blood and retreated, with broken bones and fell to the ground wailing. Some of them were even killed directly. Li Hanshan snorted coldly and took action again. He punched out, as if thousands of stars fell, bursting out with brilliant light, and hit the head of an aristocratic family hard. The face of the head of the aristocratic family changed drastically. He raised his hand and struck out a giant diamond hammer, facing Li Hanshan. Bang! A loud noise was heard, and the giant diamond hammer instantly shattered. The head of the aristocratic family was also blown away on the spot, vomiting blood, and his face was extremely pale. The head of the family looked ferocious and extremely angry, and roared, "Li Hanshan! It's useless for you to kill us. The power of our families is spread all over the Qin dynasty. Someone will definitely avenge us." Li Hanshan grinned, "Don't worry, even if they don't come to me, I will go to them, and no one can escape." The head of the aristocratic family wanted to say something more, but Li Hanshan didn't bother to listen at all, and rushed out like a ghost, heading straight for him. He swung out his fist, and the dazzling light of his fist streaked through the void, carrying a fierce energy, and went straight for the head of the aristocratic family. The head of the aristocratic family's pupils shrank suddenly, and he quickly used his defensive spirit treasure to resist. However, as soon as the spirit treasure was sacrificed, it was instantly shattered. Puff! The head of the aristocratic family spurted blood and flew backwards on the spot. His internal organs were shattered, his breath was sluggish, and his vitality disappeared. In fact, Li Hanshan's condition is not good. If the heads of these aristocratic families unite, they may not be able to deal with him in his current condition. But Li Hanshan's momentum was so strong, so fearless and ferocious that no one dared to confront him head-on. He was as powerful as a rainbow and moved forward bravely, sweeping away all enemies along the way. His momentum was like breaking bamboo. In just half a cup of tea, 20 or 30 strong men fell. Li Han's body was stained with blood, like the Shura demon king crawling out of the sea of blood. Soon, except for the dark god guard, no one was left standing in the entire Zhao mansion. The ground was full of corpses, and blood gathered into streams, dyeing the earth red. These women from the Zhao family were already frightened and dumbfounded, not knowing where to go. Xuanhuan, the elder of the Zhao family, wanted to protect these women and leave, but they were surrounded by dark guards and couldn't leave at all. Xuanhuan gritted her teeth and her eyes were red. She just watched her father, brother, and elders all die in this battle. Tears fell down her snow-white cheeks. Xuanhuan was filled with sadness and looked at Li Han with a pleading look on her face. Let them go, they are innocent. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Leng Mi and Bulletin Leng. Chapter 242. Innocent. Li Han sneered, his face full of sarcasm, and said mockingly. You should be glad that you are a woman now, otherwise you would have been dead long ago. When Xuanhuan heard this, her face turned pale, her body trembled violently, her hands clenched into fists, and her beautiful eyes were full of sadness. You beasts! You are totally devoid of conscience. At this time, a beautiful woman with tears in her eyes, like a broken jar, glared at Li Han, and cursed. And that tyrant emperor, he actually arrested my son and tortured him in prison. He will get his retribution sooner or later. Li Han smiled slightly, don't worry, madam, you will see His Majesty soon. I hope you can still maintain this attitude in front of His Majesty. Thinking of what will happen next, a trace of fear appeared in the eyes of the beautiful woman, and she gritted her teeth and said, You, the minions of the tyrant, will definitely not have a good end. Take them all back to the palace. Li Han was too lazy to argue with her, and waved his hand to signal Xuanhuan and the group of women to be taken to the palace. Xuanhuan did not struggle, and let the dark god guards escort her and others into the palace. After all, in the face of absolute power, any resistance is futile. The so-called dignity is even more ridiculous. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her face was numb, and her clothes were soaked with tears without her realizing it. At this moment, a large number of cultivators had already gathered outside the Zhao mansion, densely packed, tens of thousands of them. Oh my God! What happened inside the Zhao mansion? Everyone was in doubt, seeing the fire rising into the sky and thunderclouds rolling inside the Zhao mansion, a doomsday scene. I heard that the Zhao family held a banquet tonight and invited all the major families. How could there be such a big commotion? A cultivator asked in confusion. I don't know about this. The companion next to him shook his head, pondered for a moment and suddenly said, could it be that someone attacked the Zhao family? No, the commotion was too loud. It was not a sneak attack at all, but a fair and open attack. Another companion denied. That's true. The cultivator scratched his head and looked confused. At this time, a team of dark god guards rushed from a distance. This is, the dark god guards, someone exclaimed. Why are they here? Did the Zhao family lose and be wiped out by the dark god guards? That's impossible. The power of these families is spread all over the Qin dynasty. If they move one, the whole body will be affected. Your Majesty will not wipe them out so easily. What are they doing? Are they here to support? Everyone was talking about it, puzzled. The dark god guards were very fast and arrived in a blink of an eye. Many cultivators dodged and made way. The dark god guards were famous and frightening. Soon, the dark god guards surrounded the Zhao mansion. Li Han's hand slowly appeared in front of everyone. He was covered in blood and walked out of the Zhao mansion step by step. He looked around indifferently and said indifferently. The Zhao family and other families held a banquet here with the intention of rebellion. The evidence is conclusive. We are following the order of your Majesty to arrest these remnants. You should retreat quickly, otherwise you will be killed without mercy. His voice was icy cold, like the whisper of the nine nether demon, revealing a chill. Suddenly, the surroundings fell into dead silence. No one said a word. Wow! The next moment, there was an uproar all around, and all the cultivators' faces changed drastically. Many people were even panicked, gasping for air, and their bodies were cold. All these noble families rebelled? Impossible, absolutely impossible. How could these noble families rebel? These noble families are all thousand-year-old noble families. They have been developing in Dakin for so long. How could they do such a treasonous thing as rebellion? I don't believe it. The cultivators around were talking about it, and many of them shook their heads, not believing what they heard. Only the stupidest lunatics could do such a thing as rebellion. How could these noble families rebel so blatantly? At most, they were just venting their dissatisfaction. Many people suspected that Xuanhuan was talking nonsense, but they didn't dare to speak loudly because the dark god guards were right in front of them. And whether they believed it or not, the facts were in front of them. The Zhao family was completely slaughtered, leaving no one alive. Only Xuanhuan and other women were left standing there alone, looking pitiful. Everything was clear, the Zhao family was really destroyed. Other families were no exception, and all the heads of the families were killed. But, these families are top families, with thousands of years of inheritance, rich heritage, and many masters in the family. How could they be destroyed by thousands of dark god guards? Everyone was talking in shock, with an unbelievable look on their faces. Some people even rubbed their eyes, wondering if they were hallucinating. The dark god guards are getting more and more terrifying. Everyone was silent. Let's go. Xuanhuan ignored the discussion of the crowd and waved his hand. Soon, Xuanhuan and others took the Zhao family women to the direction of the palace and disappeared in the night. After the dark god guards left, these people gradually recovered. This Zhao family is finished. Some cultivators who were originally friendly with the Zhao family sighed repeatedly. Alas, not only the Zhao family, but all the families in Chang'an City are probably finished this time. After so many years, they finally fell. Not only did they lose thousands of years of inheritance, but they also lost the entire family. Many people sighed with emotion. But, Dakin is still facing so many powerful foreign countries, but Your Majesty is killing people at this moment. Isn't it inappropriate? Someone whispered, worried. After this, everyone was silent for a long time. No one knew what His Majesty wanted to do, but the crisis of Dakin has not been settled yet, and it is unwise to hold such a massacre at this time. I think Your Majesty is just taking advantage of the situation. Suddenly, a young man snorted coldly, shook his head, and looked very understanding. Your Majesty has always been afraid of the strength of these families and didn't want them to grow, so he deliberately found an excuse to eliminate these families. Hearing the young man's analysis, many people nodded suddenly and showed their approval. Your Majesty is good in everything, but he is too lustful and suspicious. He has almost killed all the prominent figures in Dakin. Yes, someone sighed, looking helpless. Your Majesty is indeed stupid on this point. The sky was slightly bright. The dark guards escorted thousands of prisoner cars to the palace. These prisoner cars held women crying like pear blossoms in the rain, with beautiful faces, gorgeous clothes, and good temperament. They were all the direct descendants of aristocratic families. Your Majesty, it's unjust, unjust. A woman with a slender figure and a peach-like face knelt on the prisoner car, crying and begging for mercy. Your Majesty, you can't do this. Your Majesty, please spare my life. Your Majesty, I am willing to serve you as a slave for the rest of my life. In the prisoner cars, thousands of women from aristocratic families kept kowtowed and prayed, crying and begging. These women from aristocratic families were all delicate beauties, who were spoiled and pampered on weekdays. They had never experienced such cruel things. Noisy. Li Han's eyes flickered and he shouted coldly. Instantly, infinite black light burst out, turning into a huge net covering the prison car, instantly trapping these noble women, and no sound was heard. Alas! Looking at this scene, many monks who were watching sighed. This scene was so familiar. It reminded them of the time when His Majesty slaughtered all the scholars of the Xuanhuan Academy in the city, and they had a new understanding of the cruelty and bloodthirstiness of this tyrant. Once these noble women were brought into the palace, their fate could be imagined. This scene was sad and infuriating, but it was useless. Even those monks who had already supported Qin Mu began to doubt their choice at this moment, and couldn't help but curse in their hearts. Timid monarch. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mian Buletin Leng. Chapter 243. In the Jinluan Palace, ministers had already gathered, arguing and holding their own opinions. Your Majesty, if you do this, it will chill the hearts of the people of the world. Yes, now is the time when Dakin needs people. How can you, alas? If the noble families counterattack, Dakin will be in danger. Your Majesty is forcing these noble families to rebel. If this continues, it will inevitably lead to a monstrous disaster. Your Majesty. Many quarrels, one by one, filled with righteous indignation, and every sentence is filled with strong grief and indignation. In their opinion, His Majesty is simply playing with fire and playing with Dakin's country. If it is allowed to develop like this, Dakin will sooner or later suffer a devastating blow. However, some ministers hold opposing views and believe that the criminals should be severely punished and these noble families should be killed. What do you know? Your Majesty is doing this to avoid future troubles. An old man in a white robe sneered and glanced at everyone with disdain. These noble families have deep roots and are intertwined. Over the years, they have been plundering the people's blood and sweat, embezzling the national treasury, and secretly communicating with forces in other regions, raising troops and plotting evil. They are deeply sinful. Today, Your Majesty is just doing justice for the heaven. That's right, Your Majesty is doing this for Dakin. On the other side, an old man in a blue robe also sneered, have you forgotten that when the Kanyu dynasty, Qianyuan dynasty, and Zhang Luoshan of the Northern Territory attacked Dakin together, they were like entering an empty land and encountered no resistance at all? Why didn't these noble families come forward at that time? The blue-robed old man's voice was sonorous and resounding, which moved people. If these noble families are not eliminated, the Qin dynasty will perish. That's right, don't be soft-hearted. The existence of noble families is too threatening. Although Your Majesty's move is a bit radical, it is not without benefits. I support Your Majesty. Another group of ministers also expressed their opinions. These ministers have deep resentment towards these noble families, so they naturally criticized them mercilessly at this time. Nonsense. Some conservative ministers were furious. The two factions argued endlessly and refused to give in to each other, which led to the ministers constantly scolding them. For a while, no one could convince anyone. Although the national teacher Du Yulin did not participate, his views were more inclined to the conservative side. At this time, he looked at the ground, frowned, and whispered, I hope it won't be too big, otherwise, the trouble will be really big. He knew that His Majesty would kill people if they disagreed with him. But he never expected that His Majesty would repeat his previous behavior again, swaggeringly taking so many women from noble families into the palace. With this kind of behavior, wouldn't anyone who saw it have to call him a tyrant? If someone with ulterior motives exaggerated and spread it, I'm afraid it would immediately cause a storm in the court, and it is not impossible to cause a riot. The consequences are simply unimaginable. Your Majesty, what exactly are you trying to do by doing this? When he thought of this, Du Yulin was very confused. As a person who cherishes his reputation very much, he really can't understand why His Majesty frequently does such things that damage his reputation. It's not impossible to forcibly abduct the wives of officials and women from noble families. After all, the entire Qin belongs to His Majesty, who can stop him from doing what he wants. It's just that this kind of thing can obviously be done secretly, but His Majesty chose to act in a high-profile manner, making it known to the whole city, letting everyone know how ridiculous he is. This is simply leaving a handle for others to talk about. It will be really hard for His Majesty to end it if he does this. Your Majesty can't continue to do this. Du Yulin narrowed his eyes, and a trace of determination flashed across his face. When Your Majesty appears, I must persuade him a little, otherwise, I'm afraid there will be big problems. The ministers were still arguing. At this time, a minister suddenly said, "It's so late, Your Majesty, is he not going to court again today?" As soon as this was said, the originally noisy hall suddenly became quiet, and everyone turned their heads and looked around in silence. Yes. His Majesty didn't go to court again today, so what's the point of them arguing here? It's just a waste of words. Your Majesty. A minister sighed, hesitating, how can I get His Majesty to go to court? After the voice fell, the eyes of the ministers looked at the national teacher Du Yulin at the same time. If you want to say who can make His Majesty go to court in this court, that person must be the national teacher, and only the national teacher can do it. Du Yulin saw that everyone was looking at him, and his face couldn't help but twitch a few times. Even if these ministers didn't speak, Du Yulin could read their meaning from their eyes. National Master, it's not a big deal that His Majesty hasn't come to court yet, or I'll trouble you again. An old minister whispered tentatively. Du Yulin. National Master, His Majesty doesn't listen to the advice, please give him a good advice. Seeing this, all the civil and military officials hurriedly stood up, bowed slightly, and said respectfully. After a moment of silence, Du Yulin finally sighed and slowly stood up. It was time for him to take action again. Du Yulin felt that he needed to refine the black coffin into his own weapon so that it would be easier to take out in the future. Just when he was about to take out the black coffin, suddenly a loud voice echoed throughout the audience. Your Majesty has arrived. Boom. Suddenly, the void shook, and an extremely powerful aura broke through the air. Du Yulin suddenly raised his head. I saw a golden light coming through the sky, and it turned out to be an extremely luxurious imperial palace. His Majesty. It's Your Majesty. The ministers looked happy and looked at Du Yulin with admiration. The imperial preceptor is the imperial preceptor. He is getting stronger and stronger. Now he can send His Majesty to court without even carrying out a coffin. Even Du Yulin himself was a little shocked. Your Majesty actually went to court? Qin Mu sat on the imperial banquet, looking forward, with an indifferent and majestic expression. Around him, a carriage pulled by a statue of a strange beast flew around, and groups of armored soldiers guarded the left and right. Just like the gods in the sky patrolling the world. The originally noisy main hall fell silent instantly. I'm going to pay homage to Your Majesty. Seeing Qin Mu coming through the air, all the officials bowed to the ground. Qin Mu glanced at him, walked down slowly, stood with his hands behind his back, and looked down at the ministers. His eyes were cold and seemed to contain thunder. Such a look fell in the eyes of the ministers, and everyone was immediately frightened and terrified. Your Majesty, are you getting angry? Flat body. After a long time, Qin Mu narrowed his eyes and spoke calmly. Thank you, Your Majesty. Hearing this, the ministers breathed a sigh of relief and quickly got up. Qin Mu looked peaceful, looking past the ministers and looking around. I am here to announce two things today. The first thing is that I want to canonize the demon saint Sumair of the Fox clan as my concubine. The second thing is that I want to establish new laws and reform the family system. Wow! As Qin Mu's voice fell. In the main hall, all the ministers' expressions changed, and they all lost their voices in shock. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mian Buletin Leng. Chapter 244. Your Majesty, you actually want to consecrate the demon saint of the Fox clan as your concubine? The ministers were all shocked and speechless just after hearing the first thing Qin Mu announced. Although they didn't know who Sumair was, just the words Fox clan demon saint were enough to make them tremble with fear. Demon saint. Your Majesty is indeed your Majesty, you are really having more and more fun. Looking at the demon world, among the beings who can be called demon saints, which one wouldn't stomp one's foot and make the entire demon world tremble? These two words represent the most powerful group of demons in the demon clan. They are the top beings of the pyramid and control hundreds of millions of demon clan. Moreover, he is also the demon saint of the Fox clan, which is even more terrifying. The Fox clan not only possesses the weirdest charm techniques in the world, but also controls many strange secret techniques, which can be said to be endless troubles. Such a terrifying demon saint of the Fox clan should be included in His Majesty's harem. Even want to be canonized as a concubine and treated like a harem empress. How is this possible? Is this crazy? Your Majesty, think twice, the demon clan is causing trouble to the human world, you must not be credulous. Yes, Your Majesty, please think twice. The demon race is our mortal enemy. Your Majesty must not. After a brief moment of sluggishness, the ministers reacted, immediately fell to their knees and shouted one after another. In the hearts of these ministers, the alien races and monsters are the biggest enemies of the human race, and everyone must kill them. If Your Majesty really canonizes the Fox clan as a concubine, wouldn't it give the demon clan an opportunity to take advantage of? They have lived for so many years, and countless people have died tragically at the hands of the demon in each generation. They have long hated it to the core of their bones. Their impression of the Fox clan was also extremely bad. The Fox clan is the best at deceiving people, and they now even suspect that Your Majesty has been charmed by the demon saint of the Fox clan. Otherwise, why are you so stupid? When many ministers thought of this, their expressions changed drastically. Their heads were buzzing and their hearts were beating wildly. They suddenly realized something. They seemed to have found the reason why His Majesty was so stupid. Snort. Hearing the shouts of the ministers, Qin Mu raised his eyebrows slightly and snorted coldly. In an instant, a burst of coercion fell out of thin air. All the ministers felt a huge and irresistible pressure falling from the sky, and they fell to their knees one after another. Looking at the group of courtiers kneeling below, Qin Mu's eyes grew colder. What? Are you trying to disobey me? Qin Mu's words immediately caused all the ministers to become silent and tremble. But soon, a feeling of sadness and anger came to my heart. How could they allow the demon clan to wreak havoc on Qin? At this thought, an old man suddenly raised his head and looked directly at Qin Mu. Your Majesty. Your Majesty, this is absolutely inappropriate. Your Majesty, the demon clan and the human race are great enemies, and the demon girl of the Fox clan is causing trouble in the world. Do you want to allow her to bring harm to the Qin dynasty? What's more, those who are not of my race must have different thoughts. Your Majesty, please think twice. The old man roared at the top of his lungs and burst into tears. With this old man taking the lead, others followed suit. Yes, Your Majesty. Such evil spirits should not enter the royal family, otherwise they will definitely bring disaster. Your Majesty, please think again. For a time, the crowd was excited, and countless ministers knelt on the ground and shouted, "Your Majesty, you must not include this fox demon saint in your harem. I beg your Majesty to take back your order." More and more courtiers in the crowd knelt on the ground with trembling voices, kept kowtowing, and spoke out words of advice. If His Majesty was just playing with a random Fox Clan woman, they would never have such a big reaction, but the other party was the Fox Clan demon saint. Once His Majesty is confused by it, it will be unimaginable. If one fails, the Qin dynasty will be doomed. However, Qin Mu seemed to have ignored the voices of these courtiers. He put his hands behind his back, his eyes were cold, and he said nothing. "Your Majesty, you should think twice." Seeing this, the ministers became more and more impatient. His Majesty's behavior clearly indicates that he has identified the witch. How can this be done? Your Majesty, you must be careful. His Majesty. The ministers became more and more panicked. Du Yulin was stunned for a long time, and then he spoke with difficulty, "Your Majesty, are you sure you want to do this? Is there anything wrong with me doing this?" Hearing this, Qin Mu raised his eyebrows slightly, smiled, and asked lightly, "His Majesty." Looking at Qin Mu's half-smiling face, Du Yulin pursed his lips slightly. After a moment of silence, he finally spoke, "Your Majesty is a 95-year-old lord and will last forever. How can you make peace with the Fox clan? Your Majesty, you have to think clearly." His voice trembled. "Oh." Qin Mu's eyes narrowed slightly and he looked at Du Yulin, "Is the Imperial Master educating me? I don't dare, but I think this matter is of great importance and we shouldn't make a hasty decision." Du Yulin's heart was shocked, and cold sweat dripped down his forehead. But he still bit the bullet and continued, "I dare not question His Majesty's decision, but please forgive me for saying more. If this matter spreads, Dakin will definitely be held accountable, despised, and even attacked by other human forces. Your Majesty, please think twice before acting." Du Yulin's voice was hoarse, almost pleading. "His Majesty." Wang Xing on the side couldn't help but speak, trying to dissuade him. However, before he could finish speaking, Qin Mu's voice interrupted him. "Shut up, everyone." Qin Mu's voice was indifferent and his expression was cold to the bone. His gaze swept across the ministers below, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. "Who stipulates that the Fox tribe cannot fall in love with the human tribe?" Qin Mu's voice suddenly became furious, "Even if I kill all the officials today, I will not take back my life. If you don't believe it, then stand up and try it yourself and see whether your mouth is stronger or my sword is sharper. You must remember that this is my kingdom, and I am the emperor." Boom! As Qin Mu finished speaking, the sky suddenly darkened, and invisible pressure instantly enveloped the entire place. The temperature above the entire court seemed to have plummeted to 1,000-year frost. All the ministers froze and felt a cold air rising from the soles of their feet and spreading throughout their bodies. They felt as if they were falling into an abyss, surrounded by darkness and unable to escape. This pressure is too strong. Looking down at all living beings like a god. Your Majesty, calm down. I know my mistake. Sensing Qin Mu's murderous intention, all the ministers were so frightened that they even kowtowed and begged for mercy. A minister raised his head tremblingly, on the verge of tears, "It's not that I don't believe in your Majesty." However, before he could speak, Qin Mu lightly interrupted his words and turned around to leave a sentence. 3 days later, I will personally order the troops at the East City Gate and lead the expedition. You will not be absent. As soon as he finished speaking, Qin Mu had already left the Jinluan Hall. The civil and military ministers were left crawling on the ground, terrified. What should I do? After a long time, a minister trembled and spoke, his face turned pale and he almost collapsed to the ground. This. Alas. Looking at Qin Mu leaving, Du Yulin sighed and slowly collapsed on the ground. National Master, what should we do? All the civil and military officials were anxious and helpless. His Majesty has issued an order, what else can we do? We can only hope that everything will be fine. Du Yulan lowered his head and murmured to himself. It's all gone. Finally, he shook his head, sighed and waved away everyone. Your Majesty, sigh. Oh, what a sin. All the civil and military ministers dispersed with worried faces. Du Yulan stood in front of the independent golden palace, looking up at the sky with a sad face. And the other side. In the palace, in the prison. Qin Mu's figure appeared here. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Leng Mian Buletin Leng. Chapter 245. See your Majesty. Seeing Qin Mu suddenly appearing, the jailers on both sides quickly fell to the ground. It is worth mentioning that these jailers are all female jailers carefully selected by Qin Mu. Because all the prisoners held in this sky prison were women, Qin Mu specially selected a group of female jailers to look after these female prisoners. Each female jailer has a beautiful face, a hot figure, and beautiful appearance. She wears tight-fitting black clothes and outlines her graceful curves. Especially the pair of beautiful legs, slender and straight, alluring. It makes people's blood rush and their minds wander. Your Majesty, this servant will help you undress. As soon as Qin Mu approached, a female jailer with skin like snow and picturesque features came forward. She took off his dragon robe for him, unbuttoned his coat, and put on clean and comfortable regular clothes. She is tall and tall. Although she is a full head shorter than Qin Mu, she can still give people a sense of heroic appearance. Not only that, her figure is curvy, with a slender waist and plump breasts, which is very tempting and makes people think. Coupled with that beautiful face, every move is full of breathtaking charm. And this female jailer is none other than the subjugated princess of the Aoki kingdom, Lu Ningxuang. Ever since Lu Ningxuang failed in her assassination and was suppressed by Qin Mu, she has been staying in this deep palace and never stepped out again. She did not die, nor did she become a prisoner. Instead, she became a member of the harem and became a concubine. She is very aware of her situation. As long as she gives up the hatred of her family and country and does not commit suicide, she will be able to enjoy a lifetime of luxury and wealth. But that is the hatred of the family and the country, how can it be given up so easily? Lu Ningxuang has always been obsessed with revenge, but unfortunately, she is too weak to take revenge. As a member of the harem, she can get a lot of information that outsiders cannot know, even the national master does not know. For example, the news that Qin Mu has been promoted to the realm of saint, such as the existence of the enlightenment tree, etc. Lu Ningxuang has no doubts about these news. Because as the person beside him, she felt the saintly pressure emanating from Qin Mu more than once. Under Qin Mu's hands, he had no power to fight back. Not only in terms of strength, but also in other aspects. When she thought of Qin Mu's power and Great Qin's growing strength, Lu Ningxuang felt helpless and desperate in her heart. Although she didn't want to admit it, she knew very well that there was no hope of revenge in her life. The only thing he could hope for might be that he could give birth to an heir, so that the Aoki kingdom wouldn't have its bloodline cut off. This is a very dramatic thing. The Aoki kingdom was destroyed by Qin Mu, but she had to rely on Qin Mu to continue the bloodline of the Aoki kingdom. Lu Ningxuang didn't know whether she should be grateful or desperate. So she subconsciously chose to escape and voluntarily came to this prison to be a jailer. Although this may cause her to fade out of Qin Mu's sight, and ultimately lead to her staying away from the inner circle of the harem. But at least, my heart will not live in endless suffering like before. Lu Ningxuang lowered her eyes slightly and quietly changed into Qin Mu's regular clothes. Her movements and techniques were very skillful. It was difficult to tell that her previous identity was that of a princess of a country. Looking at the girl in front of him, Qin Mu looked calmly and let Lu Ningxuang help him undress and take off his belt. Although Lu Ningxuang was not imprinted with a demon mark, she did not pose much of a threat to Qin Mu. So Qin Mu wasn't worried about any tricks she might play. Of course, if Lu Ningxuang really wanted to do something evil to him, he would definitely let Lu Ningxuang understand why the flowers were so red. Lu Ningxuang's movements were very gentle and slow, and she quickly dressed Qin Mu in regular clothes. "Your Majesty, get dressed." After buttoning the last button, Lu Ningxuang raised her head and revealed a charming smile. Qin Mu shook his head and smiled, "Ningxuang, your smile is a bit fake." After hearing this, Lu Ningxuang's expression suddenly froze. However, she quickly regained her composure, knelt on the ground and said respectfully, "Your Majesty, please forgive me. Perhaps this servant has not seen your Majesty for several days, and is a little excited inside, so her smile is a little more concrete than before." Qin Mu smiled half-heartedly, "Is that really the case?" Lu Ningxuang gritted her teeth and tried to control the strange emotions in her eyes. "It's absolutely true. I am loyal to your Majesty. Please trust me." Qin Mu sighed and said seriously, "Ningxuang, I hope you won't lie to me. After all, I really like you and don't want to hurt you." Hearing these words, Lu Ningxuang's delicate body trembled violently, and then her face turned pale and intense cold sweat broke out on her forehead. She felt as if her heart was being squeezed hard and the pain was immense. She would rather Qin Mu punch and kick her, even torture and humiliate her, than be so gentle and considerate, which makes her feel infinite fear. Some strange thoughts flashed through her mind, making her feel breathless and cold all over, as if she had fallen into the nine nether purgatory, and her soul was trembling. "This man is a devil." "Your Majesty, slave." Lu Ningxuang stopped talking and lowered her head to hide the change in expression in her eyes. "I will always be loyal to your Majesty and will never dare to have any different intentions." "Since you are so loyal to me, why do I think you have been avoiding me recently?" Qin Mu suddenly asked. "Slave." Lu Ningxuang hesitated to speak, a look of struggle appeared on her pretty face. Looking at the complicated look in the other person's eyes, Qin Mu shook his head and smiled, "If you don't want to say it, forget it. I won't make things difficult for you." Lu Ningxuang finally breathed a sigh of relief. Then she lowered her head and agreed softly, "I will follow your Majesty's instructions." "Yes." Qin Mu nodded lightly and walked straight to the depths of the sky prison. Lu Ningxuang followed Qin Mu obediently, hesitated for a moment, and finally gritted her teeth and asked cautiously, "Your Majesty, are you sure about this expedition? During this period, various forces are ready to move. It is said that they have formed an alliance to deal with Dakin." Qin Mu raised his eyebrows slightly, looked at her in surprise, and chuckled. "It seems that you are very concerned about these things. Why, if I fail in the expedition and die outside, will you be the first to feel happy? After all, this way you will get your revenge." Lu Ningxuang's pretty face turned pale, and she knelt on the ground with a plop. "Your Majesty, please forgive me, I never meant to do that, and I have never thought about it." She did think so in her heart, but she didn't expect Qin Mu to say it so bluntly. Lu Ningxuang became more and more panicked, and before she knew it, sweat seeped out of her back. Seeing her panic, Qin Mu raised a playful smile and asked calmly, "I remember you were not such a timid person before, why are you becoming less and less like yourself now?" When Lu Ningxuang heard this, she bit her lower lip with her pearly teeth and kept silent with her head down. After a while, Lu Ningxuang opened her red lips and slowly said, "Your Majesty misunderstood me. I am not timid, but I am worried about your Majesty." After that, she continued, "Your Majesty's trip is extremely dangerous. I don't want your Majesty to take risks, so I am particularly worried." Lu Ningxuang's words were not all lies. After all, if Qin Mi really had an accident, she would not have a good ending. Those ministers of the Qin dynasty regarded her as an unstable factor and wanted to get rid of her at any time. Qin Mu shook his head, turned around and continued to walk forward, sighing with regret. You, I don't blame you, why are you so scared? I still like the unruly you before. Lu Ningxuang was stunned, and then her heart skipped a beat, and her eyes were sour. She didn't like herself now, but in this deep palace, except for Qin Mu, the master of the harem, who else could be her true self? Maybe there is, but it's not her. Or, it's not her at this moment. Lu Ningxuang gritted her teeth, held back the tears that were about to burst out, held back the emotions in her heart, and hurriedly followed Qin Mu's pace. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mi and Buletin Leng. Chapter 246. See Your Majesty. Your Majesty. As Qin Mu walked by, many female jailers knelt down and saluted with charming and respectful voices. The eyes they looked at Qin Mu were full of admiration, infatuation, and admiration, even mixed with a strong surge of arousal. Their thoughts are the same as Chiruo's. Once they can get Qin Mu's favor, it will be equivalent to flying on a branch and becoming a phoenix, and their lives will change by leaps and bounds. For them, this is their only way to advance and their only opportunity. Qin Mu was already accustomed to such eyes, and walked towards the deepest place without changing his expression. There, the female family members of the aristocratic family captured this time were imprisoned. Lu Ningxuang pursed her pink thin lips tightly and followed Qin Mu with her eyes lowered, trying to reduce her presence as much as possible. Soon, the two of them came to the torture chamber at the deepest part of the prison. Lu Ningxuang looked at Qin Mu's back with inexplicable eyes. The female prisoners in the cage were also looking at Qin Mu. Their clothes were messy, revealing large areas of snow-white skin, their bodies were thin, their eyes were full of despair, and they looked very embarrassed and miserable. Some women even had bruises all over their bodies, which was shocking. These are the women from aristocratic families who were once at a high level, but now they are reduced to prisoners. In just one night, they fell from the clouds into the quagmire, losing their former dignity and glory. Qin Mu stood at the door with his hands behind his back. Each of them had complicated expressions, looking at Qin Mu with fear, hatred, desire, fear, and resentment. Various complex expressions appeared on their faces. Of course, there is more fear and hatred. To them, Qin Mu was undoubtedly a cruel and ignorant king who was bloodthirsty and ruthless. It was precisely because of Qin Mu that they fell into such a miserable situation overnight, from a high-ranking female family member to a humble prisoner. This huge contrast made them emotionally agitated and difficult to accept. They wanted to eat his flesh and sleep on his skin. But unfortunately, they were weak and had no room to resist. And he even knew that if he wanted to survive, he could only save his life by pleasing the man in front of him. Otherwise. Thinking of this, their delicate bodies trembled slightly, and their hearts were filled with despair. They are all legitimate daughters of aristocratic families, and they have always lived a life of luxury. And now he is reduced to serving a devil? This was unacceptable to them. But what if you don't accept it? They have become prisoners and there is no possibility of them getting out of jail. Lu Ningxuang looked sideways at them, with a hint of sympathy in her eyes, because she felt the same way. The reality is so cruel. While Lu Ningxuang was thinking wildly, Qin Mu had already opened the door and walked into the cell. In the prison, a woman was tied to an iron pillar by chains. Her hair was disheveled and she had long lost her usual delicate appearance. She was in an extremely miserable state. But even so, she still couldn't hide her beauty. Especially at this time, her cheeks were a bit sickly pale, which made her originally pretty face look even more charming and charming, making her even more pitiable. Qin Mu came over with his hands behind his back. Qin Mu. Seeing Qin Mu walking in, the woman raised her head, her bright and clear eyes rippling with anger and pain intertwined in her eyes. The moment Lu Ningxuang saw the woman, she was shocked. Because she knew the woman, she was Xuanhuan, an elder of the Zhao family. How could she become like this? Lu Ningxuang's eyes were in a trance, as if she saw Xuanhuan, who was incomparable glory in the past. Qin Mu looked at the beautiful woman in front of him with an extremely cold expression. He sat directly in front of the other party, leaned lazily on the cushions, glanced indifferently, and said lightly, "What's your name?" Zhao Wanrong clenched her fists, a trace of humiliation flashed in her eyes, but she still replied obediently. "My family's surname is Zhao and my given name is Wanrong." Although the Zhao family has disappeared in name only, Zhao Wanrong always has hope in her heart, hoping that one day she can leave this dark place. So even if Qin Mu left her here now and made her suffer all kinds of torture every day, she would force herself to get through it. She had to get through it, before she could have any hope of revenge. Qin Mu raised his eyebrows slightly and raised a smile at the corner of his mouth. "Zhao Wanrong, that name sounds quite nice." Zhao Wanrong bit her red lips and lowered her eyes. Qin Mu stared at the incomparably beautiful woman in front of him, his smile suddenly faded, and his eyes revealed an icy coldness. "Do you know your guilt?" Zhao Wanrong's body trembled slightly, but she soon regained her composure. After a moment of silence, she slowly said, "Your Majesty, we are already here. If you want to kill or hack me, I have no power to resist." Zhao Wanrong's voice gradually became colder, and her face turned pale as paper. "You are the lord of the Qin dynasty, and you control the lives of hundreds of millions of creatures. You can decide our life or death with just one word, so there is no need to ask for guilt." Tisk tisk, he is indeed the most sober person in the Zhao family. Even if he is trapped in prison, he is still charming. Seeing her empty eyes, Qin Mu sighed in admiration. As he spoke, he stretched out his right hand and gently lifted the woman's smooth and delicate chin with his long white fingers. "It's a pity that it has ended up like this. It's really a pity." Zhao Wanrong looked dull and did not struggle. "Your Majesty, I am willing to serve your Majesty like a cow or a horse." Her voice was hoarse and weak. "I just ask your Majesty to forgive the rest of my family." Hearing this, Qin Mu smiled and nodded, "Okay." Zhao Wanrong was stunned. She thought Qin Mu would continue to humiliate her, but she didn't expect that he would agree to her so easily. "You agreed?" "Yes." Qin Mu nodded. "Since you are so sincere, I will give you a chance to atone for your sins." With that said, he opened the shackles on the other party. "My family is willing." Zhao Wanrong was overjoyed and hurriedly knelt down on the ground and kowtowed to express gratitude. "Thank you for your kindness, your Majesty." "Let's go." Qin Mu stood up. "It's time for you to forgive me." Zhao Wanrong nodded quickly and was about to get up. However, at this time, then I heard Qin Mu say, "There's no need to be a cow or a horse. I still need a puppy by my side. Just follow me for now." There was a hint of mockery in the corner of Qin Mu's mouth. Zhao Wanrong suddenly froze in place, with a look of confusion on her face. A pair of beautiful eyes widened, the pupils shrank violently, and she almost lost her voice. What? Then, she saw Lu Ningxuang standing aside, holding a chain in her hand. "I'm offended," Lu Ningxuang said with a trace of apology in her eyes and in a very low voice. Zhao Wanrong closed her eyes, tears appeared in her eyes. She was desperate inside and did not even dare to have the thought of resistance. She lowered her eyes slightly and allowed Lu Ningxuang to tie the chain around her neck. Then, he slowly walked out of the cell on all fours. "At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mi and Bulletin Leng. Chapter 247. Alas! Seeing this scene, Lu Ningxuang couldn't help but sigh, and a feeling of sympathy rose in her heart. As a person who had been through it, she knew very well how cruel Qin Mu was. Anyone who entered the cell would suffer such torture. But she was powerless to stop it. She was too weak and couldn't change anything at all. Your Majesty, how should these women be dealt with? Lu Ningxuang glanced at the group of trembling female prisoners. These female prisoners were not old, 28 years old, beautiful, graceful, elegant, all of them were daughters of the imperial city's nobles, and they were used to being arrogant on weekdays. But at this time, they were all scared, pale, with messy pearls and jade on their heads, tattered clothes, like beggars. Qin Mu's eyes swept over the group of female prisoners, and his indifferent voice sounded. This matter is left to you. Lu Ningxuang heard this, and a look of astonishment appeared on her face. Leave it to her? Lu Ningxuang took a deep breath, suppressed the doubts in her heart, and said respectfully, Yes, Your Majesty. Yes. Qin Mu nodded slightly, then glanced at Xuanhuan lightly, turned and walked out. Let's go. I understand. Xuanhuan took a deep breath, suppressed the sadness and shame in her heart, and followed Qin Mu, staggering and shaking. At night, the sky was full of stars. In the depths of the palace, a ball of fire swayed and jumped, like a charming flower blooming. That was where the Vyang Palace was. Boom boom. Accompanied by bursts of thunder, dark clouds rolled, electric snakes shuttled, and torrential rain suddenly fell on the earth, submerging the entire palace in heavy rain. Qin Mu stood in front of the palace gate, looking at the burning bonfire, his face indifferent. And Lu Ningxuang stood aside with a plate of hot food, motionless. Eat, after you finish, I have something to ask you, Qin Mu said lightly. Xuanhuan's face turned pale as snow when she heard this, and her body trembled slightly. She hesitated for a moment, and finally followed Qin Mu's instructions, took the food box, opened it, and started eating. This was a bowl of steaming hot spiritual rice, steamed rice. The rice grains were crystal clear and full, exuding an attractive fragrance. The rice used was extremely precious spiritual rice, which contained rich spiritual energy. But Xuanhuan had no appetite at all. She lowered her head, and her slender white jade hands grabbed the chopsticks and kept stirring the rice in front of her. Drops of tears overflowed from her eyes, soaking the broken hair on her temples. Xuanhuan cried, her heart had already been in pain, and her tears could not stop. Her mind had already drifted away, and many pictures flashed in her mind. She suddenly wanted to cry and shout, but she tried her best to curb her impulse. All of this, she buried in her heart, no one could notice, but it only strengthened her belief in wanting to live. After a long time, Xuanhuan reluctantly ate half a bowl of spiritual rice, and then she couldn't swallow it anymore. She raised her head and looked at Qin Mu with tears in her eyes. Your Majesty, I'm full. Xuanhuan lowered her head, her tone humble and fearful. Yes, Qin Mu nodded. Your Majesty can ask, Xuanhuan whispered. Do you hate me? Qin Mu's indifferent voice sounded. Hate? Xuanhuan was startled, and then shook her head bitterly. I dare not. Although she felt angry, humiliated, and hateful about Qin Mu's behavior. But she knew her current identity and situation better, and knew that nothing in this world was more important than being alive. The scene in the sky prison today flashed in her mind, and her heart beat violently. Are you afraid? Suddenly, a voice came into her ears from in front of her. Xuanhuan froze, she raised her head with difficulty, and saw a very handsome face looking at her with a smile. No, no, Xuanhuan shook her head in panic. At this moment, she seemed to be seen through. She felt that Qin Mu could read her heart. All the secrets in her heart would be exposed in front of him. Really? Qin Mu smiled and asked lightly. Do you know why those children of noble families are so obsessed with a fairy Susu? I don't know. Zhao Wanrong whispered. She didn't pay attention to those brothels. How could she know why those people pursued fairy Susu? Because fairy Susu is the Fox clan demon saint, and she is my pet, Qin Mu said leisurely. I let her bewitch those children of noble families, so they are so obsessed. What? Zhao Wanrong suddenly widened her eyes and looked at Qin Mu in disbelief. Fox clan demon saint. As expected, she was right. This matter was actually related to fairy Susu. At this moment, Zhao Wanrong felt her heart sink to the bottom of the valley. I have issued the canonization. She is the only demon concubine of my great Qin dynasty. Qin Mu's voice was still indifferent. Hiss. Zhao Wanrong took a breath of cold air. She finally understood how determined Qin Mu was. This man was actually going to canonize the fox demon saint as a concubine? Qin Mu looked down at Zhao Wanrong, who was kneeling on the ground, and said calmly. What about you? Do you want to be like fairy Susu? Hearing this, Zhao Wanrong's delicate body trembled violently. She heard the hidden meaning of Qin Mu. Fairy Susu was Qin Mu's pet, and so was she. Zhao Wanrong lowered her head, her eyes struggling. Qin Mu reached out and grabbed Zhao Wanrong's chin, forcing her to look straight into his eyes. Answer my question. Zhao Wanrong gasped in pain as Qin Mu pinched her jaw. She tried to look up at Qin Mu, her body trembling, her eyes red, and tears rolling down. I will. Zhao Wanrong gritted her teeth and said, her heart was dead, tears flowing like a spring. Very good, Qin Mu nodded, let go of Zhao Wanrong, and his lips outlined a strange arc. In that case, I will give you a soul replenishing pill to help you transform. As he said that, he waved his hand. Suddenly, Lu Ningxuan came over holding a wooden box. The wooden box was carved with exquisite patterns, and the surface was covered with a layer of faint fluorescence, and a golden dragon shadow could be vaguely seen entwined on it. Opening the brocade box, there was a red pill inside, with mist rising faintly, which looked extremely mysterious. Zhao Wanrong's pupils shrank sharply and her breathing became rapid. Although she didn't know this kind of pill, she instinctively felt its magic and extraordinariness. She could even clearly feel that this pill would greatly benefit her realm improvement. Take this pill, Qin Mu said lightly. Zhao Wanrong didn't hesitate, and immediately took the spirit-boosting pill, put it in her mouth, and swallowed it. In an instant, the rich medicinal power turned into warm energy that spread in the body, warming the whole body. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mian Buletin Leng. Chapter 248. Zhao Wanrong's injuries healed at a speed visible to the naked eye, and the depleted strength in her body was gradually replenished. Not only that, Zhao Wanrong could also clearly feel the pleasure of the blood boiling in her body, as if a warm current flowed throughout her body, making her feel comfortable and indescribable. Such a strong elixir effect. Zhao Wanrong couldn't help but exclaimed. She didn't expect that her body had recovered to 70% to 80%. Just one pill made her undergo such transformation-like changes. What if she took more? Thinking of this, Zhao Wanrong trembled with excitement, and her eyes shone with excitement. If she could become a peerless powerful person, then she could kill Qin Mu and take revenge. Bear the humiliation and bear the burden. There is still a chance for everything. Hope rekindled in Zhao Wanrong's heart. She took a deep breath to calm down her emotions and knelt on the ground respectfully. Thank you for your gift, Your Majesty. Lu Ningxuan, who was holding a brocade box at the side, saw Zhao Wanrong's expression and immediately understood what she was thinking, because she had thought the same way before. Seeing Zhao Wanrong like this, she seemed to see her former self. Lu Ningxuang shook her head inwardly and sighed. She was not optimistic about Zhao Wanrong's idea. Because she knew that the man in front of her liked to give people hope like this, and then make people fall into deeper despair. Outside the window, the wind is blowing and the rain is hitting the banana trees. The candle light in the house flickered, and the light and shadow were mottled. The two complement each other and blend together, just like the most beautiful sound and the most beautiful picture in the world. It wasn't until dawn that the sound of rain outside the window gradually stopped. In Vyang Palace, everything returned to calm. Everything is business as usual. Only the maid guarding outside the palace gate had a strange look on her face, and her eyes shone with deep envy. In the Vyang Palace, Qin Mu sat cross-legged, his spiritual energy circulating around his body, swallowing up the spiritual energy wandering between heaven and earth. Call. After a long time, he opened his eyes, took a deep breath, and looked quite comfortable. This time during his training, he reached the peak of the third level of the Saint Realm, and was only one step away from reaching the fourth level of the Saint Realm. Although it's also original, the quality is a little worse than Chu Qianyu's. Qin Mu whispered to himself. He remembered that when he first practiced with Chu Qianyu, the pure yin energy in his body was so powerful that it was terrifying, allowing him to break through the three shackles in one fell swoop. Moreover, the pure yin energy in Chu Qianyu's body is even more pure, and its quality is far superior to that of ordinary women. However, this is reasonable. Qin Mu shook his head. After all, Zhao Wanrong is not as strong as Chu Qianyu, and her talent and race are completely different from Chu Qianyu. It is already very powerful to help him reach the peak of the third level. Qin Mu thought, and a ray of soul flew out of his body. Buzz. The void roared. Qin Mu's soul was suspended in mid-air, like a small sun, shining brightly and dazzlingly. In the middle of the soul, a long sword floats, its blade is crystal clear, like glass, shining and unrivaled. In addition, there is a pitch-black earthen jar that spurts out endless black mist. The mist was churning endlessly, emitting bursts of screams like howling ghosts and wolves, which was breathtaking and terrifying. These are the Heavenly Emperor Sword and the Heaven-Swallowing Devil Jar. This expedition is their moment to shine. Boom. Following Qin Mu's thought, the Heavenly Emperor Sword and the Sky-Swallowing Devil Jar soared into the sky, bursting into endless divine glory. The divine soldiers are majestic and vast, as if they can suppress the heaven and the earth, which is terrifying. With the divine weapon in hand, Qin Mu's combat power increased several times, and he could kill beings above the fourth level of the Saint Realm without relying on other powers. This is the power of weapons. Qin Mu murmured, with a smile on his face. He raised his head and looked at the dragon couch not far away. Zhao Wanrong still closed her eyes tightly. After washing away the dust, her skin was like jade, her eyebrows were as dark as daisy, her eyelashes were slightly raised, and her facial features were exquisite and flawless. Her whole person had a tranquil and peaceful atmosphere, as lovable as the girl next door. Now that you're awake, stop pretending. Qin Mu spoke slowly, with a hint of playfulness in his tone, staring at Zhao Wanrong. Hearing his words, Zhao Wanrong's heart skipped a beat. She opened her eyes, glanced at Qin Mu, and cursed the monster in her heart. To break through to sainthood at such a young age is simply a monster among monsters and should not exist in this world at all. At this moment, Zhao Wanrong suddenly felt how ridiculous her idea of enduring humiliation and bearing the burden was. With such an enemy, even if she endures the humiliation for 10,000 years, there is still no hope, right? She clenched her fists involuntarily, and her nails dug into her flesh without noticing. Her heart was filled with despair. Your Majesty, this slave. Qin Mu waved his hand to interrupt her. Okay, stop pretending, I know what you are thinking, there is no need to say it out loud. Then he ignored her and stood up to leave. The main focus is to pull out. Ruthless. Zhao Wanrong. She hesitated to speak, but in the end she said nothing. She just stared blankly at Qin Mu's leaving figure and remained silent for a long time. Don't look at it. You'll get used to it later. At this time, on the other side of the dragon couch, a nice and lazy voice sounded. Hearing this, Xuanhuan suddenly raised her head and saw Lu Ningxuang's pretty face that captivated all living beings and turned them upside down. Lu Ningxuang turned over and came to Xuanhuan's side, patting her shoulder to comfort her. You. Xuanhuan's pretty face was slightly red, slightly embarrassed. When she thought of what happened last night, she was extremely shy. Lu Ningxuang blinked her beautiful eyes and sighed, there will be more such things in the future. Xuanhuan's delicate body trembled slightly, and her pretty face was hot. I'll leave first. I still need to deal with the Tianlao. Lu Ningxuang stood up, threw a bright smile to Xuanhuan, and then walked out leisurely. Xuanhuan was left stunned and confused. At this time, Qin Mu had already arrived in the imperial garden. In the imperial garden of the imperial palace, hundreds of flowers bloomed, colorful and gorgeous, competing for beauty, and various rare and exotic plants were everywhere, exuding a refreshing fragrance, which made people feel relaxed and happy. Qin Mu casually admired the flowers and scenery for a while, and then walked into a mountain deep in the imperial garden. Behind the mountain, there is a turquoise lake, the water is sparkling, the water is clear and you can see the fish jumping out of the water. In the center of the lake, there is a huge stone platform, about dozens of feet wide and square. Qin Mu did not go to the stone platform, but found a random position. After sitting down, he took out the fishing rod, shook his right arm, and the long rod was straightened, and the silver-white fishing line fell to the lake. Your Majesty, why are you fishing here alone? At this moment, a gentle, sweet and soft voice came from beside him. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Leng Mi and Buletin Leng. Chapter 249. A light and elegant fragrance came, accompanied by a graceful and exquisite figure, and fell beside him. I saw a charming woman in thin gauze standing beside Qin Mu, just looking at him with a smile. The woman was wearing a light pink thin smoke shirt, a plain moon skirt tied around her waist, her black hair was tied up high into a cloud of hairpins, and a few tassels were hanging in front of her forehead, fluttering in the wind. Her face was delicate and beautiful, her eyebrows and eyes were like paintings, her lips were like painted, her nose was straight, her skin was white and tender, and she was so beautiful. Qin Mu knew who was beside him without looking back, and a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, saying, "Sit down. Your Majesty." The woman bit her cherry lips, her pearly teeth seemed to sink into her lips, and she said tearfully, "Your Majesty, you haven't come to see me for a long time." Her voice was soft and glutinous rice candy, and the listener felt numb all over, couldn't help itching, and the blood boiled. After that, she slowly leaned down, and a touch of snow-white deepness was about to come out, which was very thrilling. Qin Mu smiled, "Why, do you miss me?" "Well." The woman agreed delicately, and her voice became softer and softer, like a spring breeze. She bit her lower lip lightly, her beautiful eyes were blurred, tears welled up in her eyes, and she looked extremely aggrieved. Then she sat in Qin Mu's arms, wrapped her legs around Qin Mu's waist, hugged Qin Mu's neck, and said coquettishly, "I miss your Majesty day and night, and I can't eat or sleep." Qin Mu smiled slightly, stroked the beautiful woman's hair, and teased, "Oh, do you really miss me so much?" His palm slid down to her slender and soft waist, and felt the thrilling touch through the thin moon skirt. Touched by Qin Mu, the charming woman moaned, curled up like a cat, and whispered, Yes, your majesty will go to war in 3 days, and I won't be able to see your majesty then. Qin Mu chuckled, don't worry, I will take you and the concubines in the harem to the war. Hearing this, the charming woman's eyes widened. Take her and the concubines in the harem to the war? She was stunned for a moment. Who would take the concubines in the harem to the war? Can this still be called a war? Just call it playing. Xuanhuan raised her head, her beautiful eyes full of worry and doubt. Your Majesty, are you sure you want to take me to the war? Qin Mu nodded and said affirmatively, of course, don't you want to? Of course not. Xuanhuan hurriedly shook her head to deny. Of course, she was willing to follow His Majesty to the battle, but was it really appropriate? Xuanhuan could already imagine that after 3 days, many ministers would oppose it on the spot, saying that His Majesty was too licentious and only wanted pleasure. By then, I'm afraid the whole Chang'an city would start to talk about His Majesty being a tyrant. But Your Majesty, is this really okay? Xuanhuan frowned and asked hesitantly. Qin Mu smiled, but did not answer, instead concentrating on fishing. Seeing this, Xuanhuan pursed her lips, lowered her head and dared not say more. Wow! Qin Mu suddenly pulled the fishing rod gently, and the fishing line instantly stretched straight. In an instant, the fish in the lake fled in a rush, and ripples appeared on the lake surface. A thick silver-white fishing line flew out instantly, pulling the spirit fish out of the lake. This spirit fish was fat, half a foot long, and its whole body was light blue, with swollen cheeks, struggling constantly. But no matter how it struggled, it could not get rid of the fishing rod and escape the fate of being caught on the shore. Qin Mu smiled and whispered, look, the fish is hooked, it can't escape. Xuanhuan looked up and seemed to understand something when she heard it. She always felt that there was a deeper meaning in His Majesty's words, but she couldn't guess the meaning. Let's go, eat fish with me. Qin Mu put away the fishing rod, led Xuanhuan's hand, and walked towards the stone bench on the lakeside. There were chessboards, wine pots, and other things on the stone bench. Qin Mu skillfully set up the baking tray and took the charcoal and placed it in it. Xuanhuan sat obediently aside, watching Qin Mu cooking quietly. Her beautiful eyes flickered, staring at Qin Mu's profile, and she was actually infatuated with it. At this moment, Xuanhuan suddenly felt that it would be great if time could stop right here. The world is like this baking pan, and those so-called holy sects are the fish on the baking pan. Qin Mu flipped the grilled fish with a bamboo stick and smiled calmly. Xuanhuan's heart was slightly shaken when he heard his words. Your Majesty means. Qin Mu turned his head and glanced at Xuanhuan, and said slowly. I want to make the land of Qin wherever the sun and moon shine and the rivers flow. Xuanhuan's heart trembled, and she couldn't help but be extremely excited. Her beautiful eyes stared at Qin Mu with fanatical eyes and extreme admiration, and she murmured. Your Majesty. At this moment, Qin Mu became extremely brilliant in her eyes, as if he was the only god between heaven and earth, omnipotent. Qin Mu smiled, and the tone suddenly changed, and he said, in my hometown, there was an emperor who once said something. He said that the greatest joy in life is to hunt down your enemies everywhere, occupy their land, plunder their wealth, and listen to their wives and children crying. I now truly understand what he said, it's so damn right. Hearing this, Xuanhuan burst out laughing. She was already a peerless beauty, stunningly beautiful, and now she smiled, she was even more charming and heart-stirring. Qin Mu couldn't help but stare at her in a daze, and after a moment of shock, he came to his senses and laughed and scolded. Fairy. Hearing this, Xuanhuan's pretty face flushed, lowered her head, snorted, and said angrily, Your Majesty, how can you say that about your concubine? Qin Mu smiled and continued to turn the fish meat. Xuanhuan stopped talking, just looked at Qin Mu quietly, without blinking. At this moment, time passed, the air was quiet, and the years were quiet. Ding! A system sound rang out, causing Qin Mu's eyes to move slightly. The system reward is finally here. P.S. I originally said that I would update it today, but I broke my promise again. There are really too many things going on recently, because Len Mian is getting engaged next month. I wanted to talk about it after confirming the date, but I will talk about it now. After 5 years of dating, we are finally getting engaged. Thinking about it, I still feel a little emotional. I feel lost and confused. Various emotions are intertwined. It is very complicated and I can't express it in a few words. But it is really troublesome. I need to buy 3 golds, buy an engagement ring, plan a proposal, prepare a betrothal gift, go to her house to give gifts, meet both parents, prepare an engagement banquet, etc. It's all about money. I went to several gold shops a few days ago. The price of gold is now 598 yuan per gram. Who can afford it? After a long time of selection, I was short of money and could not afford to buy it. I planned to go to the bank to buy a gold ingot to make a bracelet. The gold price in the bank is cheaper. I wanted to write well today, but I spent another day looking at the decoration of the engagement scene. It was really troublesome. This is just an engagement. The real marriage will be more troublesome. I feel overwhelmed just thinking about it. And I roughly calculated that if you don't count the house and the car, a wedding will cost at least 300,000. I really. This month and next month, Len Mian will keep updating, and try to update as much as possible. Thank you for your tolerance. I love you. When the date is set, Len Mian will tell you. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mian Bulletin Leng. Chapter 250. Ding the host is detected to have eradicated the noble families in Dakin regardless of the consequences, and received a stupid reward, 1 million Dongxu realm dead soldiers. Ding the host has been absurd for many days and ignored state affairs, and received a stupid reward, the Dharma image of the Emperor of Heaven. Ding the host has been detected to have appointed the fox demon Saint Sumayer as his concubine, ignoring the hatred between the human race and the demon race, and put Dakin on the dangerous edge of verbal criticism, and received a stupid reward, the innate treasure of Hongmeng, Chaos Bell. The system prompt sound came into his ears one after another. Qin Mu raised his eyebrows and couldn't help laughing. It seems that I am quite competent as a stupid king. 1 million Dongxu realm dead soldiers are a powerful foundation. What is the concept of Dongxu realm? It is a strong person second only to Zandao realm and Saint realm. Even the Kanya queen has taken off her red clothes, and now she is only in Dongxu realm. The female emperor of the dynasty, who was gifted with great talent, superior comprehension, and had gathered all the power of the dynasty, barely reached the void realm. It is conceivable how difficult it is to reach this realm. Qin Mu estimated that the combined power of all the holy lands and sects in the apocalypse domain did not have 1 million void realm masters. Although the void realm masters were insignificant in front of the saints and some powerful beings, they were still invincible opponents for ordinary cultivators. The Heavenly Emperor Dharma image was a magical power that matched the Heavenly Emperor sword. When used in conjunction with the Heavenly Emperor sword, it could exert several times or even dozens of times the power. As for the Hongmeng innate treasure, the Chaos Bell, there is no need to say more. The Chaos Bell, which is said to be able to imprison time, suppress space, rebound any attack and all spell damage, has both offensive and defensive capabilities, and is an innate treasure that is invincible, infinite in creation, and infinite in mystery. It was the Hongmeng innate bell that was bred by heaven and earth when the chaos first began, and its power was against the sky. Qin Mu looked inside his body. A small bell with a golden body and simple style was floating in the sea of spirits. The bell was shaped like a bowl, surrounded by thick mist and purple light, which was very mysterious. Qin Mu's mind moved slightly. The haze gradually dissipated, revealing the true appearance of the small bell. The golden bell was engraved with dense and tiny runes, each of which contained an inexplicable aura of the great Dao. There was a glow in the bell, exuding the supreme charm of suppressing everything and sweeping across the universe. The surrounding was also surrounded by the phantoms of the sun, moon, and stars, like a chaotic disk, which was extremely mysterious. A majestic and vast breadth spread out, covering all directions. This was the Chaos Bell, the innate treasure. Qin Mu's mind moved, and the small bell suddenly made a buzzing sound, and the inscriptions on the wall of the bell seemed to come alive. Then the body of the bell shook violently, and strands of chaotic light gushed out from the body of the bell. In an instant, the entire imperial garden was covered with chaotic light, full of auspicious atmosphere. Your Majesty. Xuanhuan felt the chaotic energy overflowing, her mind was shocked, and she couldn't help but take a breath. She could clearly sense how powerful and overbearing the breath emanating from the Chaos Bell was, and there was a power that seemed to destroy the world. This was a power that did not belong to this world. She stared at Qin Mu with her big beautiful eyes, her eyes full of shock. This wave was so strong that she couldn't breathe at all. Even the soul was trembling. Qin Mu did not answer. He stared at the Chaos Bell, his eyes were shining, and a slight arc was outlined at the corners of his mouth. It is said that the Chaos Bell can also reverse time and space, reverse yin and yang, and evolve the changes of the way of heaven. I don't know if it is true or not. Qin Mu whispered softly. As an innate treasure, the Chaos Bell has all kinds of incredible powers. It can evolve thousands of magical powers and even has the power to suppress the Hongmeng world. Qin Mu pinched his fingers and hit the small bell with a series of magic spells. The small bell hummed and vibrated, bursting out billions of feet of light. The next moment, the bell waves overflowed, shattering the void, and an extremely terrifying wave spread, making Xuanhuan couldn't help but step back a few steps, with a look of horror on her face. Circles of ripples spread out, and the ripples became wider and wider, and finally spread throughout the void. Crack! The sky suddenly cracked a dark crack. Xuanhuan was shocked and looked up, but saw that there was another world outside the crack. That was a world with bright fairy light and divine rainbows all over the sky. The fairy light and the rosy light intertwined together, gorgeous and incomparable. Lotus flowers bloomed, the fairy air was ethereal, and the fairy cranes cried long, colorful, and colorful. Stars flickered, and the silver moonlight fell, illuminating the heavens, like a dream scene. Is this the fairyland? Xuanhuan stared at the boundless sky, her beautiful eyes intoxicated. This is a completely unfamiliar new world with endless fairy light. Fairyland? Maybe. Qin Mu whispered. He raised his hand and pointed, and a faint green light burst out. The green light quickly grew larger and turned into 1,000 feet high, standing in the air like a pillar. The next second, the green light suddenly shrank into a needle shape, turning into a long sword that penetrated the sky. The long sword cut through the void, penetrated through many obstacles, and disappeared in the distant unknown. Boom! Suddenly, thunder exploded above the 9 heavens. A thick purple lightning tore through the night and slashed towards the green long sword. Swish! The green long sword was instantly cut off and disappeared. I was actually blocked. Qin Mu frowned. But it's not that the Chaos Bell is not good, but that his power is not enough. Although the Chaos Bell is an innate treasure with terrifying power to suppress everything, the power required is too huge, far beyond Qin Mu's current power. Therefore, even if the Chaos Bell tears the void, it cannot really cross the barrier between the two worlds and enter other worlds. It is not enough to cross the distance between the two worlds of the fairy world and the mortal world. However, Qin Mu knows that there is indeed another world above this world, and that's enough. Qin Mu looked at the Chaos Bell in front of him with a deep gaze. Then he stretched out his hand and the Chaos Bell suspended in the air flew to his palm, slowly rotating, emitting bursts of low hums, turning into streams of light and merging into his body. Your Majesty. Yunyaner came over, hesitant to speak. Qin Mu was about to speak, but suddenly frowned slightly, his face turned pale in an instant, his body swayed a few times, and he almost fell down. Yunyaner exclaimed, Your Majesty. She reached out to support Qin Mu, who was shaking for a few times, and leaned him against her arms. Qin Mu covered his chest and coughed twice. It's okay, I just used too much force, and I didn't expect to be attacked back. He wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to test the world opened by the Chaos Bell, but he didn't expect to be attacked back. Fortunately, the Chaos Bell has recognized its master, otherwise it would have been seriously injured. Speaking of which, this is the first time he has been injured. Yunyaner's pretty face was nervous, and she hurriedly asked with concern, Your Majesty, how are you? Then she put Qin Mu on the couch in a panic. Your Majesty, wait for me here first, I will call the Imperial Doctor for you immediately. Qin Mu smiled and held Yunyaner's soft hand. No, you can help me treat it. Yunyaner blinked and pointed to her nose in a daze. Me. Qin Mu leaned over and whispered a few times in her ear. Yunyaner suddenly realized, her pretty face flushed, and she looked at Qin Mu shyly. She lowered her head and bit her pink lips, like a tender spring onion. She slowly took off her clothes, revealing her crystal clear skin and delicate collarbone. Only a veil was left to cover her, revealing her snowy body. Your Majesty.